the slow poison. The spare bedroom had perfect morning light. I stood in the doorway, measuring tape in hand, mentally placing the crib against the far wall where sunlight would filter through sheer curtains, but never directly hit the baby's eyes. 3 years of trying, countless appointments with Dr. Rodriguez, and finally, Vanessa was 12 weeks pregnant. The dresser could go here, I said, gesturing to the corner. Close enough to the changing table, but leaving room for the rocking chair. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe, one hand on her still flat stomach. You've been planning this room for months. Years, I corrected, pulling out my phone to show her the Pinterest board I'd secretly maintained. Look, this mobile with the woodland creatures would match the mural I want to paint on that wall. She smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes, a shadow I'd later recognize as panic. At the time, I dismissed it as normal pregnancy anxiety. When do you leave for the veterinary conference? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Next Thursday, 4 days in Denver. I set down the measuring tape and wrapped my arms around her from behind, hands joining hers on her stomach. I almost want to cancel. What if something happens while I'm gone? Nothing will happen, she said quickly. Too quickly. It's just 4 days. I kissed her temple, breathing in the vanilla scent of her shampoo. Dr. Rodriguez said everything looks perfect. Strong heartbeat, good measurements. This time next year, we'll have a little one crawling around in here. She turned in my arms, and for a moment I saw raw fear in her expression. Gabriel, what if? No what ifs, I interrupted gently. We've been through enough what ifs. This is our time. 3 months later, I would stand in this same doorway, staring at the same empty room, wondering how I'd missed every sign. The house felt different when I returned from Denver. Not obviously. Vanessa had left all the lights on as usual, her shoes kicked off haphazardly by the door, mail stacked on the kitchen counter. But something in the air had shifted, like the barometric pressure before a storm. Vanessa, I called out, setting down my conference bag. I found her in bed, curled on her side, facing away from the door. The blinds were drawn tight despite it being 3 in the afternoon. Hey, I said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. I tried calling. Your phone was off. She didn't turn around. I lost the baby. The words hung in the air, refusing to make sense. I'd been gone 4 days. 4 days ago, we'd seen the heartbeat on the ultrasound. 4 days ago, everything was perfect. When? My voice came out strangled. Yesterday. I started bleeding Sunday night. By the time I got to the hospital, she pulled the covers tighter around herself. They said it happens. Spontaneous miscarriage. Nothing anyone could have done. I wanted to gather her in my arms, but she seemed to shrink away from my touch. Why didn't you call me? I would have come home immediately. What could you have done? Her voice was flat, emotionless. It was already over by the time I got to the emergency room. They did a D&C to make sure everything was clear. Which hospital? I'll get your records. Talk to the doctors. Gabriel, please. She finally turned to face me, and her eyes were red-rimmed but strangely dry. I can't talk about this right now. I just need to sleep. I spent that night in the hallway outside our bedroom, my back against the wall, laptop balanced on my knees as I researched spontaneous miscarriage statistics. 1 in 4 pregnancies, usually in the first trimester. Rarely preventable. The medical websites offered cold comfort in clinical language. My veterinary training kicked in, the part of my brain that diagnosed and treated loss every day. But this wasn't a client's pet. This was our child, our future. The next morning, I called the practice and told them I'd need extended leave. Family emergency, I said, and my office manager didn't press for details. Take all the time you need, Dr. Thorne, she said gently. We'll manage. I threw myself into caring for Vanessa with the same methodical attention I brought to critical cases. Nutritious meals appeared on schedule. Medications were organized in weekly pill containers. Appointment reminders were set for follow-up care. I handled all the calls from concerned family members, crafting the same explanation over and over. Spontaneous miscarriage, no one's fault. She needs time. Vanessa moved through the house like a ghost. She'd emerge from the bedroom for meals, push food around her plate, then retreat. When her phone buzzed, She'd glance at it and quickly flip it face down. "You should eat more," I said one evening, watching her dissect a piece of grilled salmon into microscopic pieces. "The protein will help with recovery." "I'm not hungry." "Dr. Rodriguez called to check on you. She wants to see you for a follow-up." "I'll call her back," Vanessa said, but I knew she wouldn't. 2 weeks passed in this strange purgatory. I'd find her crying in unexpected moments, folding laundry, watching television, standing in the kitchen holding a coffee mug. But when I tried to comfort her, she'd stiffen and pull away. "Everyone grieves differently," my sister Mira told me during one of our phone calls. "Give her space." "It feels like she's grieving alone," I said, "like she won't let me share this with her." "Maybe she feels guilty." Women often blame themselves, even when miscarriages are completely random. I wanted to believe that explained the distance between us. The way she flinched when I touched her stomach. The way she'd started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, a canyon of cold sheets between us. 3 weeks after the miscarriage, the insurance paperwork arrived. I'd taken over handling all the household administrative tasks, trying to remove any additional stress from Vanessa's shoulders. The stack of mail on the kitchen counter had grown thick with sympathy cards, medical bills, and insurance statements. I sorted through them methodically, creating separate piles for different categories. The explanation of benefits from our insurance company was several pages long, filled with codes and medical terminology that meant nothing to most people. But I'd spent years dealing with veterinary insurance claims, learning to decode the Byzantine language of medical billing. That's when I saw it. CPT code 59840. I frowned, pulling out my phone to look it up. The search results made my stomach clench. Induced abortion for therapeutic reasons. That couldn't be right. I checked the diagnostic code, 004.9. Complete spontaneous abortion. The codes contradicted each other. One indicated a spontaneous miscarriage, the other a therapeutic termination. I spread the pages across the kitchen table, comparing dates and procedures. The timeline was wrong too. According to the paperwork, the initial consultation happened on Monday, the day after she said she'd started bleeding. My hands were shaking as I photographed each page. There had to be an explanation, a billing error, a coding mistake. These things happened all the time in medical billing. But then I found the itemized bill from the clinic. Not the emergency room she'd mentioned, but a private women's health clinic 30 miles away. The consultation charge, the ultrasound, the blood work, the procedure itself, coded and documented with methodical precision. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun set, the papers spread before me like evidence in a crime scene. Because that's what this was beginning to feel like, a crime. Not just against our marriage, but against the insurance company, against the truth. Vanessa emerged from the bedroom around 8, wrapped in the oversized university sweatshirt she'd claimed from my closet years ago. "You should eat something," she said, not really looking at me. "I'm not hungry." She glanced at the papers on the table and I watched her face carefully. A micro-expression of panic, quickly suppressed. "Insurance stuff," I said casually. "Just organizing for our records." "Oh," she turned toward the refrigerator. "I might make some toast." "Vanessa, was there anything unusual about your emergency room visit? Any complications they mentioned?" Her hand paused on the refrigerator door. "Why?" "Some of these codes seem off. I might need to call the insurance company, make sure they're processing everything correctly." "It was all standard," she said quickly. "The doctor said it was a textbook spontaneous miscarriage. Nothing complicated." Textbook. The word sat heavy between us. "Which emergency room did you say you went to?" "St. Mary's." She pulled out the butter, her movements jerky. "Why all the questions?" "Just trying to understand the paperwork. You know how I am with documentation." She attempted a smile. "My little control freak. Always need to have everything filed perfectly." I smiled back, but it felt like wearing a mask. "That's me." She made her toast and retreated to the bedroom. I heard the television turn on, some reality show about house hunting. Such normal sounds for such an abnormal moment. I gathered the papers carefully, storing them in a manila folder that I tucked into my laptop bag. Then I went to the spare bedroom, the nursery that would never be, and sat in the darkness, trying to reconcile the woman I'd loved for 7 years with the evidence spread before me. The next morning, I called in sick to work again and drove to the local library. Using their computer instead of our home network, I researched every code, every procedure, every legal implication of insurance fraud. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. She'd scheduled the termination while I was at the conference. The Monday consultation, Tuesday procedure, then claimed it was a spontaneous miscarriage to collect insurance benefits, bereavement leave from her real estate firm, and most importantly, to maintain the fiction with me. But why? Why terminate a pregnancy we'd tried so hard to achieve? The answer came 6 weeks later, in a phone conversation she didn't know I was recording. Our state was one of 38 with one-party consent laws for recording conversations. I'd looked it up after discovering the insurance fraud, part of my methodical research into legal protections and evidence gathering. The small digital recorder I'd purchased fit easily in my pocket, voice-activated to prevent any telltale clicking sounds. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers. The insurance documents suggested deception, but they didn't explain why. Vanessa had become increasingly secretive with her phone, taking calls in the bathroom with the water running, texting late at night with the screen angled away from me. That Tuesday afternoon, I'd come home early from work with a supposed migraine. Vanessa's car was in the driveway, but when I entered through the back door, quietly, to avoid worsening my headache, I heard her voice from the living room. I know, she was saying. But what was I supposed to do? I stood frozen in the kitchen, recorder already running in my pocket from when I'd tested it in the car. The timing would have been obvious, she continued. Gabriel was at that conference in Denver. We haven't been together since 2 weeks before that. My chest constricted. The conference had been a month ago. No, he totally bought the miscarriage story. Thank God he believed it. I couldn't keep your baby, Connor. Not when Gabriel and I have been trying for 3 years. Connor Hayes, her broker at the real estate firm, married with 2 kids. I'd met him at company Christmas parties, watched him glad hand his way around the room with his wife Sophie, always a step behind, smile fixed, and eyes tired. I know you wanted me to leave him, but it's not that simple. The house is in both our names, our finances are completely intertwined. And if he found out, Connor, he's not stupid. He's already asking questions about the insurance paperwork. I reached into my pocket, ensuring the recorder was still running. The insurance thing will be fine. I had a friend code it as a spontaneous miscarriage. They do it all the time for women who need help. Gabriel won't dig deeper. He's too destroyed about losing the baby to question it. A friend who worked in medical billing, committing fraud. Another thread to pull. I have to go. He'll be home soon with his migraine. Yes, I'll see you at the office tomorrow. Connor, stop. We have to be careful now more than ever. I heard her footsteps approaching and quickly backed out through the kitchen door, making it to my car. I drove around the block, waited 5 minutes, then pulled into the driveway normally, making sure to slam the car door. When I entered, Vanessa was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. How's your head? She asked without looking up. Better. The medication helped. I'm making soup, something light. I watched her hands, the wedding ring catching the light as she diced carrots. The same hands that had signed false insurance documents. The same hands that had touched another man while I was trying to advance my career to better provide for our family. Vanessa, I said quietly, is there anything you want to tell me? The knife paused for just a moment. About what? Anything. We've been through something traumatic. Sometimes trauma brings up other issues. She resumed chopping. I don't know what you mean. I mean, if there's anything about the miscarriage, about us, about anything that you need to share, I'm here. There's nothing to share, she said firmly. I lost our baby. That's all there is to it. Our baby. The lie came so easily. That night, I transferred the recording to multiple cloud storage accounts, encrypted and password protected. Then I began my real research. Divorce law, insurance fraud statutes, and the admissibility of recorded conversations in court. The insurance fraud report took me 3 days to compile. I approached it like a veterinary diagnostic case, methodical, thorough, emotionless. Every document was scanned and organized chronologically. The recorded confession was transcribed and notarized. The contradictory medical codes were highlighted and annotated with their official definitions. I drove 2 towns over to use a FedEx office to print and ship everything, paying cash. The package went to the insurance company's Special Investigation Unit, with copies to the State Insurance Commission and the District Attorney's Office. No return address? The clerk asked. No, I said, but I need delivery confirmation. The next step was protecting my assets. Mira, my sister, was a forensic accountant who specialized in high-conflict divorces. When I called her, she heard something in my voice immediately. What's wrong? She asked. I need professional advice. Can we meet for lunch, somewhere private? We met at a small restaurant 40 miles from my town, in a booth in the back corner. I laid out the evidence methodically, watching my sister's expression shift from concern to anger to professional calculation. This insurance fraud is serious, she said, studying the documents. Potentially felony level, depending on the amount they paid out. It's not just about the money, I said. She lied about losing our child. There was no miscarriage, Mira. She terminated the pregnancy because it wasn't mine. My sister reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Gabriel. No one should have to go through this. I need to know how to protect myself, financially, legally. I can't let her take half of everything after this. Mira pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. First, open a new bank account at a different bank. From this point forward, your salary goes there. It's legally permissible since you're planning to separate. Won't that look like hiding assets? Not if you document everything. Keep perfect records. Every penny accounted for. Second, we need to inventory all joint assets and debts immediately. Take photos of everything, valuables, documents, account statements. Create a paper trail that can't be disputed. What about the house? That's trickier. You can't sell or mortgage it without her consent, but you can document its current condition and value. Get a professional appraisal. If she damages anything or sells assets, you'll have proof for the court. I took notes as Mira outlined a defensive strategy. Everything had to be above board, legally bulletproof. No room for accusations of financial manipulation or coercion. You should also consider security measures, she added. Change your passwords, enable two-factor authentication on everything. Get a P.O. box for sensitive mail. And Gabriel, you might want to talk to Ray about personal safety. Ray was her husband, a detective with the local police force. You think she might get violent? I think people do unexpected things when cornered. The insurance fraud investigation will trigger notifications. She'll know something's happening. Better to be prepared. That evening, I began implementing Mira's advice. New bank account opened online. Passwords changed on every account I could think of. Two-factor authentication enabled. I even changed the passwords on my streaming services. The small indignities of untangling a life. Vanessa was at a real estate showing until late. I used the time to photograph everything. Her jewelry, my veterinary equipment, electronics, furniture. Each item cataloged with estimated value and purchase date. It felt like performing an autopsy on my marriage. Each documented item another organ removed and weighed. Connor Hayes had a reputation at Pinnacle Real Estate. I'd heard whispers at the company parties I'd attended with Vanessa, how he gave the best leads to certain female agents, how his door was always closed during mentoring sessions, how his wife Sophie had stopped coming to company events. What I hadn't known was that Sophie Hayes worked in medical billing at a large healthcare management company. The same company that processed claims for several area clinics. I learned this from LinkedIn during one of my late-night research sessions. Sophie's profile showed 10 years of experience in medical coding and billing compliance. Her recent activity included liking several articles about insurance fraud detection and whistleblower protections. On impulse, I sent her a message. Mrs. Hayes, I believe we have some mutual concerns regarding our spouses. If you're interested in discussing this matter privately, I'm available to meet at your convenience. Her response came within an hour. Mr. Thorne, I've been expecting something like this. Calf? Lucia, downtown. Thursday, 2 p.m. Sophie Hayes looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a bad night's sleep, but the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been pretending everything was fine for far too long. She was already seated when I arrived, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was anchoring her to the table. "I know about the affair," she said without preamble. "I've known about all of them." "All of them?" She laughed bitterly. "Your wife isn't the first subordinate Connor has been mentoring. She's just the latest. Number 4, by my count, though there could be others I don't know about." I sat down, processing this information. "Why haven't you left?" "Practical reasons. We have 2 kids. Connor controls our finances. Everything's in his name or his company's name. He's made sure I'm financially dependent." She paused. "But recently I discovered something that might change that dynamic." "The insurance fraud," I said. Her eyes sharpened. "You know about it?" "I have documentation, medical codes that don't match, a therapeutic termination coded as a spontaneous miscarriage." "I saw those claims come through our system," Sophie confirmed. "We process for that clinic. The codes were altered after the initial filing. That's a federal offense." "Would you be willing to provide that information to investigators?" "I've already filed a whistleblower complaint with our compliance department," she said. "But there's more. Connor paid for the procedure. I found the credit card charge. He's complicit in the fraud." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 betrayed spouses comparing notes like detectives working a case. "There's something else you should know," Sophie continued. "Connor's been promising these women partnerships, better territories, preferential treatment. It's textbook sexual harassment, creating a hostile work environment. 3 former agents left because of him, but they were too scared to file complaints. Would they talk now? Maybe, if someone else went first, if they knew they weren't alone." I pulled out a business card for the attorney Mira had recommended. "This is my lawyer. She specializes in employment law as well as family cases. If those women want to come forward, she can help them do it safely." Sophie took the card, studying it carefully. "You're very methodical about this." "I'm a veterinarian," I said. "When I diagnose a disease, I don't just treat the symptoms. I identify the pathogen and eliminate it completely." "And what's your treatment plan for this particular infection?" I outlined what I'd done so far: the insurance fraud report, the asset protection, the documentation. Sophie nodded along, occasionally adding details that filled in gaps. "Connor has a pattern," she said. "He targets women who are financially vulnerable. Single mothers, recent divorcees, young agents just starting out. Your wife was unusual, married, stable. I think that's why he pushed harder, took bigger risks. Like financing a fraudulent medical procedure." "Exactly. He's gotten sloppy, arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable because he brings in the biggest numbers at the firm." "Everyone's touchable," I said. "It's just a matter of finding the right pressure point." Sophie smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "You know, I always wondered what Vanessa saw in you. No offense, but you seemed so quiet at those parties. Reserved." "Still waters," I said. "Run deep," she finished. "Connor's about to find out how deep." The first domino fell on a Tuesday, exactly 60 days after I'd filed the insurance fraud report. I was at the veterinary clinic, examining a German shepherd with hip dysplasia, when my phone buzzed with an email from the insurance company's Special Investigation Unit. "Reclaim Yubber 78432VT. Interview request." They wanted to interview me regarding discrepancies in a claim filed on my policy. The tone was carefully neutral, but I could read between the lines. They'd found something. "Dr. Thorne, we're ready for you in surgery," my veterinary assistant said. "Give me 5 minutes." I called my attorney from my office, door closed. "They want to interview me," I said. "Good. That means they're taking it seriously. Don't volunteer anything beyond the facts. Answer their questions honestly, but don't elaborate. You're the victim here, remember that." "When should I tell Vanessa?" "You don't. Let the investigators do their job. The less she knows about your involvement, the better." That evening, Vanessa was unusually chatty at dinner, talking about a new listing she'd acquired, a Victorian that needed extensive renovation. "The sellers are motivated," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "Divorce situation. They just want out." "Divorce is expensive," I observed, "financially and emotionally. These two can barely stand to be in the same room. We had to do separate walkthroughs because they refused to see each other." "What caused it?" She shrugged. The usual. Infidelity, supposedly. Though they're both probably guilty. Usually are. The casual way she dismissed the destruction of a marriage made my stomach turn. I excused myself and went to my home office, where I'd been slowly organizing my files. Everything important had been digitized and backed up to multiple secure locations. Physical documents were in a safety deposit box Vanessa didn't know about. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Connor's being called in for a meeting with the senior partners tomorrow. He doesn't know what it's about. The second domino was starting to wobble. The next morning, I met with the insurance investigators at their regional office. Two of them, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Chen and a younger man who introduced himself only as Torres. They had a thick file on the table between us. Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming, Chen began. We need to discuss some claims filed under your policy. Of course. You reported a suspicious claim regarding a miscarriage. I reported discrepancies in medical coding that suggested potential fraud. Torres pulled out a document. The claim in question was for a spontaneous abortion, coded as 003.9, but the procedural codes indicate a therapeutic termination. That's correct. Was your wife pregnant? I believed so. We'd been trying for 3 years. She told me she was 12 weeks pregnant. And the miscarriage? She told me it happened while I was at a veterinary conference in Denver. I have documentation of my travel dates. Chen made notes. Did you accompany her to any prenatal appointments? The initial confirmation and the 8-week ultrasound. I was scheduled to attend the 12-week appointment, but the conference came up. Do you have any reason to believe the pregnancy wasn't viable? I chose my words carefully. The 8-week ultrasound showed a strong heartbeat and normal development. Dr. Elena Rodriguez can confirm this. We've already spoken with Dr. Rodriguez, Torres said. She confirmed the pregnancy was progressing normally at 8 weeks. They asked more questions about our relationship, our finances, whether Vanessa had seemed different before the miscarriage. I answered factually, providing documentation when requested. Mr. Thorne, Chen said, finally, are you aware that filing a false insurance claim is a felony? I am. And are you aware that we've found evidence of claim tampering at the clinic level? This was new information. I wasn't aware of that. Someone with administrative access altered the diagnostic codes after the initial filing. We're working with the FBI's healthcare fraud unit to identify the individual responsible. The FBI. The third domino was already falling. Connor's meeting with the senior partners didn't go well. Sophie sent me updates throughout the day, gleaned from her network of contacts at Pinnacle Real Estate. He's been suspended pending investigation. Something about misuse of company resources and violation of corporate policies. The real estate board had received my anonymous complaint, backed up with documentation Sophie had provided about Connor's pattern of behavior. 3 former agents had come forward with their own complaints after my attorney reached out to them. The pattern was undeniable. Quid pro quo arrangements, hostile work environment, abuse of supervisory position. That evening, Vanessa came home in tears. Real tears, not the manufactured grief of her fake miscarriage. Connor's been suspended, she said, collapsing on the couch. They won't say why, but everyone's talking. They're saying he was inappropriate with female agents. I sat in the armchair across from her, maintaining distance. That's serious. It's ridiculous. Connor's a mentor. He helps develop talent. Is that what he was doing with you? Developing your talent? The question hung in the air. Vanessa's tears stopped abruptly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm just trying to understand the situation. She stood up, pacing to the window. This could affect my career. Connor gave me the best leads, the highest value properties. If he's gone, you'll have to succeed on your own merits. She spun around, eyes flashing. You don't understand how competitive real estate is. Everyone needs an edge. And Connor was your edge? Stop it, Gabriel. Just stop. I'm upset about my colleague and you're interrogating me. I'm just asking questions. Well, don't. God, sometimes you're so cold. Like you're examining a sick animal instead of talking to your wife. The irony of her accusation, calling me cold while she carried another man's child and then destroyed it, was almost too much. But I maintained my composure. I apologize, I said evenly. Would you like me to make dinner? She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps sensing the shift in our dynamic, but unable to identify it. I'm not hungry, she said finally, and retreated to the bedroom. I made dinner anyway, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, the kind of healthy meal I'd been preparing since her miscarriage. I ate alone at the kitchen table, laptop open to a veterinary journal article, but my mind was elsewhere. The insurance investigation was moving faster than expected. Connor's suspension would destabilize Vanessa's work environment. Sophie was preparing her own divorce filing, armed with financial documentation Connor didn't know she had. The dominoes were falling faster now, each one striking the next with increasing force. My phone buzzed with an email from Patricia Chen at the insurance company. Mr. Thorne, we need to schedule a follow-up interview. Please bring your attorney. The fourth domino had been struck. The law offices of Brennan, Cole, and Associates occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise. My attorney, Jessica Brennan, was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper legal mind. She'd reviewed all my documentation and pronounced it devastatingly thorough. The insurance company wants to depose you, she said, as we rode the elevator to the conference room. They're building a criminal case and you're their star witness. I'm ready. They might ask about your marriage, whether you plan to divorce. Don't answer that. We're here about insurance fraud, nothing else. The conference room held more people than I'd expected. Patricia Chen and Torres from the insurance company, 2 FBI agents, a representative from the state attorney general's office, and a court reporter. Mr. Thorne, one of the FBI agents began after introductions, we're investigating a healthcare fraud ring operating through several women's clinics in the state. Your report helped us identify a pattern. A pattern? Therapeutic terminations being coded as spontaneous miscarriages for insurance purposes. We've found 17 cases so far. 17 women. 17 fraudulent claims. Vanessa wasn't special. She was just another participant in a larger scheme. We need to understand the full scope of your wife's involvement, Chen said. Did she ever mention someone helping her with the insurance claim? I thought back to the recorded conversation. She mentioned a friend who could code it properly. Did she name this friend? No. What about the man involved? Connor Hayes? What about him? We have evidence he paid for the procedure directly. Credit card records show a payment to the clinic the day of the termination. Jessica leaned forward. My client has provided all relevant documentation. What are you asking for specifically? The FBI agent opened a folder. We'd like Mr. Thorne to make controlled contact with his wife. Recorded conversations where he asked specific questions about the insurance claim. Absolutely not, Jessica said immediately. My client isn't a law enforcement officer. We won't put him in potential danger. We're not asking him to be a CI, Torres clarified, just to have normal conversations that happen to be recorded. Your state allows one-party consent. I've already been recording, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I have a conversation where she admits the miscarriage was fake. She references the insurance coding and mentions Connor's involvement. The FBI agents exchanged glances. We'll need that recording. Jessica nodded to me, and I pulled out my phone, playing the relevant portion. Vanessa's voice filled the conference room. Thank God he believed the miscarriage story. I couldn't keep your baby, Connor. The court reporter's fingers flew over her keys, capturing every word for the official record. This is extremely helpful, the Attorney General's representative said. With this evidence, we can move forward with fraud charges. When? I asked. These investigations take time, Chen said. But with what you've provided, I'd expect arrests within the month. A week later, Vanessa was served with papers at her office. Not divorce papers, those would come later, but a subpoena from the insurance company's legal department. She came home that evening white-faced and shaking. They're investigating the claim, she said, waving the papers. They want all my medical records, phone records, everything. That sounds serious, I said, not looking up from the veterinary journal I was reading. Gabriel, I need you to support me on this. Tell them it was a real miscarriage. You weren't there. You don't know what happened. I set down the journal and looked at her directly. Are you asking me to lie to federal investigators? I'm asking you to support your wife. My wife, I repeated slowly. The one who terminated another man's child and committed insurance fraud to cover it up? The blood drained from her face entirely. How did you— The insurance codes didn't match, Vanessa. I'm not an idiot. I know what CPT code 59840 means. You reported me? Her voice rose to a shriek. You reported your own wife? I reported insurance fraud. What you did after that was your choice. She threw the subpoena at me, papers scattering across the floor. You vindictive bastard. You destroyed my life over this? You destroyed our life when you slept with Connor. You destroyed our future when you terminated that pregnancy. You destroyed any chance of reconciliation when you committed fraud to hide it. It wasn't your baby, she screamed. What was I supposed to do? Tell the truth. File for divorce. Handle it like an adult instead of a criminal. She lunged at me then, nails aimed at my face. I caught her wrists, holding her at arm's length while she struggled. Let me go. Gladly. I released her and stepped back. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. My attorney will contact you about separation arrangements. You can't leave me, not now. I need you to tell them it was real, that we lost our baby. We didn't lose anything, Vanessa. You threw it away, and then you threw us away to cover it up. I grabbed the go-bag I'd packed weeks earlier and headed for the door. Gabriel, please, she called after me. I made a mistake. One mistake. I turned back. No, you made choices, multiple choices, to sleep with Connor, to terminate the pregnancy, to commit fraud, to lie to me for months. Each one was a choice, and now you get to live with the consequences. The hotel room was sterile but peaceful. I ordered room service and called Mira to update her. Are you okay? She asked. I'm relieved, I said, and realized it was true. The pretending was exhausting. What's your next move? Let the investigations play out. File for divorce once she's been charged. Take it one step at a time. Very methodical, little brother. It's the only way I know how to be. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No more pretending to believe lies. No more playing the grieving father to a child that never existed. The truth was out, or at least beginning to emerge, and there was freedom in that. Connor's house of cards collapsed spectacularly over the next 2 weeks. The real estate board's investigation had uncovered a pattern of harassment spanning 5 years. 7 women came forward with complaints, their stories depressingly similar. Promises of advancement in exchange for private mentoring, the best leads reserved for those who were team players, subtle and not so subtle pressure to be friendly. Sophie had filed for divorce and immediately frozen their joint accounts, catching Connor off guard. He'd always managed the finances, believing Sophie was too unsophisticated to understand their asset structure. He hadn't counted on her year of preparation, documenting every hidden account, every property transfer designed to shield assets. He actually tried to claim I was having an affair, Sophie told me during one of our coffee meetings. Said he had evidence I was meeting with a strange man regularly. That would be me. That would be you. His private investigator has some lovely photos of us drinking coffee and exchanging documents. Very scandalous. What did your lawyer say? That Connor should be more worried about the FBI investigation into his financing of insurance fraud. The FBI had indeed expanded their investigation to include Connor. The credit card payment to the clinic, combined with Vanessa's recorded admission that it was his baby, established him as a co-conspirator in the fraud. Meanwhile, Vanessa's world was crumbling. Without Connor's protection at the firm, she was given the leftover listings, overpriced houses that had been on the market for months, properties in declining neighborhoods, the dregs that established agents didn't want. She'd tried calling me repeatedly, but I didn't answer. All communication went through our attorneys. Jessica Brennan was earning every penny of her retainer, fielding Vanessa's increasingly desperate attempts to negotiate. She wants to reconcile, Jessica told me during a strategy meeting. Says she'll go to counseling, do whatever it takes. No. She's also threatening to claim you were abusive, that you coerced her into the termination. I pulled out my phone and played another recording. Vanessa talking to her mother 2 days after the fake miscarriage, describing in detail how supportive I was being, how I'd taken leave from work to care for her. Jessica smiled. You really did document everything. I learned from watching my sister work. Financial crimes always leave a paper trail. Speaking of which, the forensic accountant found something interesting. Vanessa has a separate account you didn't know about. She's been depositing cash gifts from Connor for the past 6 months. How much? About 30,000 total. Never more than 9,999 at a time to avoid reporting requirements. That's structuring, another federal crime. Indeed it is. The noose was tightening around both of them, each revelation adding another charge, another year of potential prison time. 3 weeks after I'd moved out, the arrests came. The arrests made the local news. Real estate power couple charged in insurance fraud scheme ran across the 6 o'clock broadcast. The footage showed Vanessa being led out of the Pinnacle real estate office in handcuffs, her face covered by her hair, but her designer suit unmistakable. Connor's arrest was more dramatic. FBI agents taking him from his country club during a golf game, his partners watching in shock. I watched from my temporary apartment feeling oddly detached. These people on the screen seemed like strangers, not the woman I'd shared a bed with for 7 years, or the man I'd made small talk with at holiday parties. My phone rang. It was Mira. Did you see? She asked. I'm watching now. How do you feel? Empty, I said honestly. Not satisfied, not vindicated. Just empty. That's normal. The anger will come later. Then the grief. Then, eventually, acceptance. Speaking from experience, from watching hundreds of divorces play out, the ones who document everything, who let the legal system work, who don't seek petty revenge, they come out healthier on the other side. The news moved on to weather, and I turned off the television. I had a surgery scheduled for the morning, a complex orthopedic case that would require all my concentration. It was good to have work, something constructive to focus on while the legal machinery ground through its processes. The next few weeks brought a cascade of developments. The medical billing employee who'd helped Vanessa alter the codes was arrested and immediately flipped, providing evidence of the broader fraud ring. 17 women were eventually charged, along with 3 clinic employees and 2 insurance company insiders. Vanessa's parents, deeply religious people who'd been thrilled about their forthcoming grandchild, were devastated when I sent them the insurance documentation and the recorded confession. Her father called me once, his voice broken. We raised her better than this, he said. We're so sorry, Gabriel. You have nothing to apologize for. We're not providing her bail money. She made her choices. Connor's situation was even worse. The real estate board revoked his license permanently. 7 civil suits were filed by the women he'd harassed, seeking damages for lost wages and emotional distress. His wife Sophie's divorce lawyer had found evidence of tax evasion, unreported cash transactions from property deals, adding IRS problems to his mounting legal troubles. Sophie and I continued to meet weekly, comparing notes and supporting each other through the parallel dissolutions of our marriages. There was no romantic element. We were both too damaged for that. But there was solidarity and shared experience. Connor's attorney wants to make a deal, she told me one afternoon. Plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testifying against Vanessa and the clinic employees. Will you agree to it? My lawyer says it doesn't matter for the divorce. The civil suits will destroy him regardless. Let him make whatever deal he wants. He's still losing everything. And he did lose everything. The house had to be sold to pay legal fees. His retirement accounts were liquidated for the divorce settlement and civil judgments. His reputation in the real estate community was destroyed so thoroughly that even after serving his sentence, he'd never work in the industry again. The criminal trial was set for 6 months after the arrests. In that time, I focused on rebuilding my life methodically. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Vanessa had little leverage given the criminal charges. She agreed to a settlement that gave me the house and most of our assets in exchange for not pursuing additional civil claims for emotional distress and fraud. I redecorated the spare bedroom, turning it from a would-be nursery into a home office. The crib I'd bought was donated to charity, along with the baby clothes Vanessa had hidden in the closet. Each item removed felt like excising infected tissue, necessary for healing. Work became my refuge. My colleagues knew about the situation. It was impossible to hide given the media coverage, but they treated me with professional respect rather than pity. My surgical success rate improved. Perhaps the emotional detachment that Vanessa had criticized made me a better veterinary surgeon. 3 months before the trial, I met someone. Her name was Amy, a pharmaceutical sales rep who called on our clinic. She was nothing like Vanessa. Quiet where Vanessa was loud, thoughtful where Vanessa was impulsive. We started with coffee, moved to lunch, then finally dinner. "I know about your situation," she said on our third date. "It was in the news. Does it bother you?" "The opposite. The way you handled it, legally, ethically, without seeking revenge, that shows character. Some would say reporting your wife to the FBI is revenge." "Is that what it was? Revenge?" I thought about it. "No, it was justice. There's a difference." Amy understood that difference. She'd been through her own divorce years earlier, though nothing as dramatic. Her ex had simply fallen out of love, found someone else, and asked for an amicable split. Clean, honest, painful, but survivable. We took things slowly. I wasn't ready for anything serious, and she respected that. But it was nice to have dinner with someone who didn't lie, who didn't manipulate, who didn't commit federal crimes to cover up their infidelity. A month before the trial, the prosecution contacted me. They wanted me to testify about the insurance documents, the recorded conversation, the timeline of discovering the fraud. I agreed, though Jessica warned me it would be difficult. "Vanessa's attorney will try to paint you as vindictive, as someone who orchestrated her downfall out of jealousy. Let them try. I have documentation for everything." Documentation doesn't always matter in court. Juries respond to emotion. Then I'll be emotional about the right things. The death of the child I thought was mine. The betrayal of 7 years of marriage. The fraud that made me an unwitting accomplice. Jessica nodded. That could work. Righteous indignation plays better than cold revenge. The week before the trial, I received a letter from Vanessa. It was handwritten, probably at her attorney's suggestion to seem more personal. "Gabriel, I know you hate me, and you have every right. I destroyed everything we built together for something meaningless. Connor wasn't worth it. The lies weren't worth it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know that's impossible. I'm just asking you to remember that we were happy once. Before the fertility struggles, before the pressure, before I lost myself in bad decisions. Please don't let them destroy me completely. I've already lost everything that mattered. Vanessa." I read it twice, then filed it with the other documentation. It was too late for appeals to nostalgia. The machinery of justice was already in motion, and nothing, not tears, not letters, not memories of happier times, would stop it now. The courthouse was a modernist building of glass and concrete, designed to inspire respect for the law through austere architecture. I arrived early on the first day of the trial, wearing my best suit and the watch Vanessa had given me for our 5th anniversary. A small irony I allowed myself. The prosecution team was thorough in their preparation. We'd gone over my testimony multiple times, anticipating every possible question from the defense. The assistant district attorney, a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Patricia from the insurance company, was particularly focused on the emotional impact. "The jury needs to see you as a victim," she explained. "Not just of fraud, but of emotional cruelty. The fake miscarriage is key. It's one thing to cheat, another to terminate a pregnancy, but to make you mourn a child that was never yours? That's unconscionable." The courtroom was fuller than I'd expected. Media coverage had died down after the initial arrests, but the trial renewed interest. I recognized several faces. Former colleagues of Vanessa's from Pinnacle Real Estate, some neighbors, Sophie sitting in the back row for moral support. Vanessa sat at the defense table in a conservative gray dress, her hair pulled back severely. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt in a way that her attorney probably hoped would evoke sympathy. Connor was being tried separately, having failed to secure a plea deal. The prosecution's opening statement was damning. Sarah Chen laid out the case methodically. The affair, the pregnancy, the termination, the insurance fraud to cover it up, the emotional torture inflicted on an innocent spouse. The defendant didn't just commit insurance fraud, she said. She weaponized grief. She made her husband mourn a child that wasn't his, that she had already chosen to terminate. She accepted his comfort, his care, his compassion, all while knowing she had destroyed the family they'd tried for years to create. The defense attorney, a man named Richard Townsend who specialized in white-collar crime, painted a different picture. Vanessa Thorne made mistakes, he admitted. She had an affair. She terminated a pregnancy. But she did so in a moment of panic, terrified of losing her marriage, her home, her stability. The insurance coding was an error, not fraud. And while her choices were wrong, they don't rise to the level of criminal conduct the prosecution suggests. The first day was mostly procedural. Jury selection, opening statements, establishing the timeline. I wasn't called to testify until the second day. State your name for the record, Sarah Chen began. Gabriel Thorne. What is your relationship to the defendant? She's my wife. We're currently in divorce proceedings. How long were you married? 7 years. Tell us about your attempts to have children. I described the 3 years of trying, the fertility treatments, the tests, and procedures. The jury listened attentively, several of the women nodding sympathetically. When did the defendant tell you she was pregnant? January 15th. She showed me a positive pregnancy test. How did you react? I was overjoyed. We'd been trying for so long. I immediately started planning, converting the spare bedroom to a nursery, researching pediatricians, calculating college savings. When did she tell you about the miscarriage? April 23rd. I'd been at a veterinary conference in Denver. When I returned, she said she'd lost the baby while I was gone. How did that make you feel? I paused, remembering Jessica's advice about showing emotion. Destroyed. It wasn't just losing the pregnancy. It was losing the future we'd planned. The child I'd already started loving. What did you do? I took leave from work to care for her. Made sure she ate, helped her shower when she was too depressed to care for herself, handled all the household duties so she could grieve. When did you discover the truth? I walked through finding the insurance documents, the contradictory codes, the investigation that followed. Sarah Chen introduced each piece of evidence, the EOB statements, the medical bills, the clinic records. I'd like to play a recording now, she said. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. Thank God he believed the miscarriage story. I couldn't keep your baby, Connor. Several jurors looked at Vanessa with undisguised disgust. How did you feel when you heard this? Sarah asked. Like my entire world was a lie. The grief I'd been carrying wasn't just pointless, it was manufactured. She made me mourn a fiction while she covered up her betrayal. The cross-examination was brutal. Townsend tried to paint me as calculating, vindictive, someone who'd orchestrated an elaborate revenge plot. You recorded your wife without her knowledge? It's legal in our state. That's not what I asked. Did you secretly record your wife? Yes. You reported her to the FBI? I reported insurance fraud to the appropriate authorities. You convinced her employer to investigate her colleague Connor Hayes? I provided factual information to relevant parties. You systematically destroyed her life, didn't you? I met his gaze steadily. No. She destroyed her life through her choices. I simply refused to be complicit in covering up crimes. You felt betrayed by the affair? Yes. Angry? Initially, yes. And you wanted revenge? I wanted justice. There's a difference. Is there? You took away her job, her freedom, her reputation. No, I interrupted. Her actions took those things away. Committing fraud has consequences. I didn't create those consequences, I just didn't shield her from them. The medical billing employee who'd helped alter the codes testified next. She'd taken a plea deal for a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation. Her testimony was devastating for Vanessa's defense. The defendant asked me to change the codes, she said, avoiding eye contact with Vanessa. She said she needed it to look like a spontaneous miscarriage for insurance purposes. Did she say why? Sarah Chen asked. She said her husband would divorce her if he knew the truth, that she'd made a mistake and just needed this one favor. Did she offer you anything in return? $5,000. Cash, the jury murmured. This was new information, evidence of premeditation and bribery. Did you alter the codes? Yes, I changed them after the initial filing so the claim would be approved. Have you done this before? Yes. It was a side business. Helping women who needed procedures covered that insurance wouldn't normally pay for. How many times? 17 that the FBI has identified. Was the defendant aware this was illegal? I explained the risks. She said she understood but needed it done anyway. The defense's cross-examination tried to establish that the witness was unreliable, a admitted criminal trying to reduce her own sentence. But the damage was done. The jury had heard about the payment, the premeditation, the conscious choice to commit fraud. Dr. Rodriguez was called next. She was careful, professional, stating only facts from medical records. The pregnancy was viable at 8 weeks? Sarah Chen asked. According to the ultrasound, yes. Normal development? Yes. Any indication of problems that might lead to miscarriage? None that were detected at that time. Did you see the defendant after the reported miscarriage? No. She canceled her follow-up appointments. The defense tried to get Dr. Rodriguez to speculate about possible complications that could have developed, but she wouldn't be drawn into hypotheticals. I can only speak to what was documented, she said firmly. Connor's testimony came on day 3. He'd been brought from county jail in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. His bail had been revoked after he'd tried to contact witnesses. He looked haggard, his country club polish completely eroded. As a hostile witness for the prosecution, he was sullen and evasive, but the evidence spoke for itself. Credit card records showing he paid for the procedure. Text messages planning the deception. Phone records proving contact before and after the termination. Did you know Ms. Thorne was married? Sarah Chen asked. Yes. Did you pursue a relationship anyway? It was mutual. Did you pay for her to terminate the pregnancy? Connor's attorney objected, but was overruled. Yes, Connor admitted. Why? She said she couldn't have my child. It would destroy her marriage. So instead, you both chose to destroy a child and commit fraud? Objection, the defense attorney shouted. Withdrawn, Sarah said, but the damage was done. Sophie testified about discovering the affair through financial records, establishing a pattern of Connor's behavior that gave context to the relationship with Vanessa. She was composed, professional, devastating in her precision. My husband had a pattern, she said. Target vulnerable women, promise professional advancement, create financial dependency, then discard them when someone new came along. Was Vanessa Thorne part of this pattern? She was the most recent iteration, yes. How do you know? Financial records, credit card statements, a private investigator's report I commissioned. Also, he'd done this 3 times before that I could document. The defense tried to object, calling it prejudicial, but the judge allowed it as establishing pattern of behavior. Vanessa took the stand on day 4. Her attorney had clearly coached her extensively. She spoke softly, made eye contact with the jury, appeared contrite. But Sarah Chen was ready for her. Ms. Thorne, you were pregnant? Yes. Who was the father? Connor Hayes. Not your husband? No. You knew this because of the timing? Yes. Gabriel and I hadn't been intimate in the necessary time frame. So you chose to terminate? I panicked. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told the truth. I was scared. Scared of what? Losing everything. So instead, you chose to commit fraud? I made a mistake in how I handled the insurance. A mistake? You paid someone $5,000 to falsify medical codes. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. I wasn't thinking clearly. Sarah Chen pulled up the timeline on a display board. You scheduled the termination consultation on Monday. The procedure was Tuesday. You paid for the coding change on Wednesday. Then you waited for your husband to return on Thursday to tell him about the miscarriage. That's 4 days of planning. Does that sound like panic to you? I was emotional. Emotional enough to accept your husband's care for weeks while he grieved a child that never existed? Vanessa started crying. I never meant for it to go that far. But it did. You let him take leave from work. Let him cook for you, care for you, comfort you about a loss you manufactured. That's not panic, Mrs. Thorne. That's cruelty. The redirect from her attorney tried to rehabilitate her image, painting her as a woman trapped between 2 bad choices. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the calculation, the planning, the deliberate cruelty of the deception. Closing arguments came on day 5. Sarah Chen was brilliant, weaving together the threads of fraud, deception, and emotional abuse into a narrative that had several jurors in tears. "This isn't just about insurance fraud," she said. "This is about the weaponization of grief. The defendant didn't just lie. She made her husband complicit in mourning a child that was never his, that she had already chosen to destroy. She perverted one of the most profound human experiences, the loss of a child, into a tool for covering up her crimes." The defense's closing tried to focus on Vanessa's emotional state, the pressure of infertility, the mistake of the affair. But it felt hollow after the evidence presented. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. "On the count of insurance fraud in the first degree, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the count of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud?" "Guilty." "On the count of falsifying business records?" "Guilty." Vanessa collapsed at the defense table. Her parents, who'd attended every day of the trial despite their estrangement, left immediately. Connor's verdict came 2 weeks later, guilty on all counts, with additional charges for tax evasion and witness tampering. Sentencing came 6 weeks after the verdict. The courtroom was less crowded, the media having moved on to newer scandals. I sat in the gallery, not sure why I needed to be there, but unable to stay away. Vanessa's attorney argued for leniency, first offense, emotional distress, acceptance of responsibility. The prosecution argued for the maximum sentence, emphasizing the premeditation and the particular cruelty of the grief deception. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no apparent sympathy for either argument, took her time. "Ms. Thorne," she began, "you've been convicted of serious crimes. Insurance fraud alone carries significant penalties. But what strikes me about this case is the elaborate nature of your deception and the emotional damage inflicted on innocent parties. Your husband spent weeks grieving a child that never existed while you knew the truth. You accepted his comfort knowing you were the architect of his pain. That level of calculated emotional cruelty is particularly disturbing. Additionally, your participation in a larger fraud ring suggests this wasn't an isolated incident of poor judgment, but part of a pattern of criminal behavior. Therefore, I sentence you to 36 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution to the insurance company in the amount of $47,000 and to your husband in the amount of $25,000 for intentional infliction of emotional distress." Vanessa sobbed as they led her away in handcuffs. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Just a hollow acknowledgement that justice had been served. Connor received 48 months due to the additional charges and his attempt to tamper with witnesses. Both would serve their time in minimum security facilities, but their professional lives were over. Real estate licenses permanently revoked. Industry blacklisting assured. Financial ruin complete. Outside the courthouse, Sophie waited by my car. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I can finally move forward." "Any regrets?" I thought about it. "No. They made their choices. We made ours." The methodical approach worked. It always does, in the end. We parted ways. Sophie to rebuild her life free from Connor's manipulation, me to continue the slow process of healing. The legal chapter was closed, but the personal journey continued. Amy was waiting when I got home, having let herself in with the key I'd given her the week before. She'd made dinner, nothing elaborate, just pasta and salad, but the normalcy of it was perfect. "Long day?" she asked. The sentencing happened. "And?" 3 years for her, 4 for him. "How do you feel about that?" "Ready to stop talking about it." She smiled and kissed me gently. "Then we won't. Tell me about your surgery today instead. The hip replacement on the golden retriever?" And just like that, life moved forward. No more depositions, no more testimony, no more evidence gathering. Just the ordinary rhythm of work and slowly building something new with someone trustworthy. The spare bedroom remained an office, but I'd started thinking about it differently. Not as the nursery that never was, but as possibility for the future. Amy and I had talked about children in abstract terms. She wanted them. I still wanted them, despite everything. "When you're ready," she always said. "There's no rush." 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter forwarded from my attorney. It was from Vanessa, writing from federal prison. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Gabriel, I know I have no right to contact you, but I needed to say this. I understand now what I took from you. Not just the marriage or the trust, but the future you'd imagined. The child you'd already started loving. Prison gives you time to think. Too much time. I replay every decision and see where I could have chosen differently, should have chosen differently. Connor writes to me sometimes. He blames me for everything, says I seduced him, ruined his life. Maybe that's what I did to you too. Ruined your life with my selfish choices. I hope you found happiness. Real happiness, not the facade we built. You deserve someone who appreciates your steadiness, your methodology, your quiet strength. I was too broken to see those as virtues instead of obstacles. Don't respond to this. I don't deserve your words. I just needed you to know that I finally understand the magnitude of what I destroyed. Vanessa. I read it twice, then filed it with all the other documentation in a box marked "Past." There was no anger left, no desire for continued vengeance. She was serving her time, living with her choices. That was justice enough. Amy and I got married a year later in a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Mira was my best woman, joking in her speech about my methodical approach to romance that had everyone laughing. We'd been trying for a baby for 3 months, approaching it with cautious optimism rather than the desperate intensity that had marked my first marriage's attempts. 2 years after the trial, Amy gave birth to our son. As I held him for the first time, I thought briefly about the child that never was, the phantom pregnancy that had started this entire cascade of events. But the thought passed quickly, replaced by the overwhelming reality of the actual child in my arms. We named him James, after Amy's grandfather. He had her eyes and my stubborn chin. The spare bedroom finally became a nursery, painted in soft blues and grays with a mobile of woodland creatures. Not the same one I'd picked out years before, but similar enough to feel like completing a circle. Sophie and I still met for coffee occasionally, our shared trauma having evolved into genuine friendship. She'd remarried, a software developer who treated her with the respect Connor never had. They were expecting their first child together. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked during one of our meetings, her hand on her growing belly. Eventually, yes. The legal system works slowly, but it works. I mean, emotionally. Being able to trust again. Love again. That took longer than the trials, I admitted. But yes, I believed it was possible. Your methodical optimism, she laughed. It's actually quite inspiring. Connor was released after serving 3 years of his 4-year sentence, good behavior and overcrowding working in his favor. He moved to another state, reportedly working in construction. The civil judgments followed him. Sophie made sure of that, garnishing his wages for the foreseeable future. Vanessa served her full sentence, released to a halfway house where she completed her probation. I heard through legal channels that she'd moved back in with her parents, working as a bookkeeper for their church. The woman who'd once sold million-dollar properties was now recording tithes and donations, her real estate dreams as dead as the pregnancy she'd terminated. 5 years after that first horrible discovery of insurance fraud, I stood in my son's nursery, now a toddler's room, watching him sleep. Amy was pregnant again, this time with a daughter. My veterinary practice was thriving. The house had been renovated, all traces of my former life painted over or removed. "You're brooding," Amy said from the doorway. "Reflecting," I corrected. "On what?" "How different life would be if I hadn't found those insurance papers, if I'd just believed the lie and moved on. You wouldn't have James, or me, or the daughter on the way." "I know. It's strange to be grateful for something so painful." "The pain was going to come either way," Amy said wisely. "At least you faced it with truth instead of living with lies." She was right. The methodical approach, documenting, investigating, pursuing legal channels, had been excruciating but necessary. Like surgery to remove a tumor, the cutting had been precise and painful but ultimately healing. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Connor tried to contact me, wants to apologize and make amends. Block and ignore?" "Block and ignore," I replied. Some circles didn't need closing. Some apologies didn't need hearing. The past was documented, filed, and stored away. The future was being written in birthday parties and bedtime stories, in ordinary moments with a trustworthy partner, in the slow building of a life based on truth rather than deception. The spare bedroom that had caused so much pain was now filled with laughter. The marriage that had been poisoned by lies was replaced by one strengthened by honesty. The child that never existed was succeeded by children who were very real, very loved, very much wanted by both their parents. Justice had been served methodically, legally, thoroughly. But the real victory wasn't in the convictions or sentences. It was in the life rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Stronger, more authentic, and infinitely more valuable because I knew its true worth. The slow poison of Vanessa's deception had nearly killed my capacity for trust and love. But like any poison, once identified and purged from the system, it left behind immunity. I would never be that vulnerable again, that naive. But I could still love, still trust, still build, just more carefully this time, more methodically, and with much better documentation. The 10-year reunion of my veterinary school class happened to fall just as the last legal threads of the past were being tied up. Vanessa's final restitution payment had been processed. Connor's last appeal had been denied. The insurance company had sent a letter thanking me for my role in uncovering the fraud ring, which had led to recovery of nearly $2 million in false claims. At the reunion, held at a hotel downtown, colleagues asked polite questions about my practice, my family, carefully avoiding any mention of the scandal that had been news for a brief, intense period. "You look good, Gabriel," said Tom, a classmate who'd gone into equine medicine. "Happy?" "I am," I said simply. "I heard you remarried. Kids?" "Two, with another on the way." "That's great, really great." The unspoken hung in the air. Everyone knew about the fake miscarriage, the trial, the conviction, but they also saw what I'd become. Successful, stable, content. The contrast with the destroyed lives of Vanessa and Connor couldn't have been starker. Amy had encouraged me to attend the reunion, saying it was important to show that I'd thrived, not just survived. She was right, as usual. There was something powerful in standing among my peers, whole and happy, the attempted destruction of my life having failed completely. During the dinner, they gave out mock awards. I received most methodical approach to everything, which got a big laugh. If only they knew how that methodology had saved me from drowning in the chaos of betrayal. Dr. Rodriguez was there. She'd been a guest lecturer at our school. She approached me during cocktail hour. "Gabriel," she said warmly, "I heard about your growing family. Congratulations." "Thank you. And thank you for your professionalism during everything." I could only report medical facts. The truth did the rest. "Still, your testimony was crucial." "The truth usually is." We talked about advances in fertility treatment, carefully avoiding any mention of Vanessa or the pregnancy that had started everything. It was a graceful dance of acknowledgement without dwelling, the kind of social navigation that becomes necessary after public trauma. As the evening wound down, I stood on the hotel balcony looking out over the city lights. Tom joined me, beer in hand. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Would you do it all again? The investigation, the trial, everything?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Even knowing the pain it would cause?" "The pain was already there. I just chose to face it honestly instead of living a lie." "That took courage." "No," I corrected. "It took method. One step at a time, one document at a time, one legal filing at a time. Courage is for dramatic gestures. I just did what needed to be done." He clinked his beer against my water glass. "Well, whatever you call it, you came out the other side better than anyone could have expected." The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after the reunion. I was between surgeries, reviewing charts, when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Dr. Thorne? There's a Detective Morrison on line 2. Says it's about an old case." I picked up, curious. "This is Gabriel Thorne." "Dr. Thorne, I'm Detective Morrison with the State Financial Crimes Unit. I'm calling about the insurance fraud case involving your ex-wife." "That case was closed years ago." "The criminal case, yes. But we've uncovered additional victims who've come forward after reading about the original trial." We're building a civil case for restitution, and we need your help. What kind of help? Your documentation from the original investigation was exemplary. We're hoping you might have additional records that could help these new victims recover damages. I still had everything, archived in cloud storage and backup drives. I can provide whatever you need. There's something else. Vanessa Thorne has been involved in a new scheme. Nothing as sophisticated as before, but she's been helping people falsify employment verification for loans. My stomach turned. She'd learned nothing. From prison? Since her release. She's violating her probation. We're building a case, but we wanted to warn you. She might reach out, try to implicate you somehow, or ask for help. She won't get either from me. I figured as much given your history, but we're required to notify potential witnesses. After I hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the family photo on my desk. Amy, James, our daughter Emma, and me at the beach last summer. The life I'd built was so far removed from the wreckage of my first marriage that it felt like looking at another person's family. That evening, I told Amy about the call. She's still committing fraud? Amy asked, incredulous. Apparently, some people don't learn. Will you have to testify again? Possibly, but it's different now. I'm not a victim anymore, just a witness with good documentation. Amy wrapped her arms around me. I'm proud of you for handling all of this with such grace. Grace might be overstating it. Dignity, then. You've never stooped to their level, never sought petty revenge. You let the law handle it. The law and methodical documentation, she laughed. Your two favorite things. That night, after the kids were asleep, I went to my office and pulled up the archived files. Everything was there, every email, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence that had built the case against Vanessa and Connor. It was a monument to betrayal, but also to survival. I created a new folder, New Investigation 2030, and began organizing what Detective Morrison might need. Once again, I would be methodical, thorough, precise. Not out of vengeance, but out of duty to the truth and to the other victims who deserved justice. The new investigation moved quickly. Vanessa had been sloppy this time, her previous sophistication replaced by desperate greed. She'd been charging people $500 to create fake employment verification letters, using her bookkeeping position at the church to create letterhead that looked legitimate. When they arrested her, she was at her parents' house, the same modest ranch where she'd grown up. Her mother called me, sobbing. Gabriel, please, can't you make this stop? Haven't we all suffered enough? Mrs. Collins, I didn't make Vanessa commit fraud. Not the first time, not this time. But you could tell them she's not a bad person, that she just makes mistakes. She doesn't make mistakes, Mrs. Collins. She makes choices. Deliberate, calculated choices to break the law. You loved her once. I loved who I thought she was. That person never existed. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me, but I felt no guilt. Enabling Vanessa's behavior had led to escalating crimes. The kindest thing was to let her face consequences. Connor, meanwhile, had apparently found religion in prison. He sent letters to various people, including me, talking about redemption and forgiveness. His letter to me was particularly manipulative, full of biblical quotes and appeals to Christian charity. Brother Gabriel, it began, which almost made me laugh. I write to you seeking forgiveness for my role in the destruction of your marriage. Satan worked through me, tempting me with worldly pleasures. I see now the pain I caused and beg your forgiveness so that I might move forward in Christ's love. I showed it to Amy, who read it with raised eyebrows. Brother Gabriel, she said, that's a bit much. He's probably building a case for early release based on rehabilitation. Religious conversion plays well with parole boards. Will you respond? No. Forgiveness doesn't require engagement. I've moved on. He can work out his redemption without my participation. The second trial was anticlimactic. Vanessa pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence, receiving 18 months and extended probation. Her parents put up their house as collateral for her bail, then lost it when she was convicted. The cascade of consequences continued, each bad decision creating ripples that destroyed more lives. Sophie and I met for coffee after the verdict. She never learns, Sophie said, shaking her head. Some people can't. They're too invested in their own narrative of victimhood. Connor's the same. His letters to everyone about finding God. It's just another manipulation. At least we can recognize it now. Hard-won wisdom, Sophie agreed. Her daughter was 6 months old, gorgeous and healthy. My third child, another son, named after Amy's father, was due any day. We'd both rebuilt completely, new families rising from the ashes of our destroyed first marriages. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't found out? Sophie asked. We would have found out eventually. Lies that big don't stay hidden forever. But maybe years later, after more kids, more investment, more to lose. Then I'm grateful we found out when we did. The recovery time was shorter. Your optimistic methodology again. It served me well. Amy went into labor that night. As I drove her to the hospital, timing contractions, I thought about the last time I'd made this drive, or thought I would be making it, with Vanessa. The phantom pregnancy that had been the beginning of the end. This was real. Amy's grip on my hand was real. The monitoring equipment showing our son's heartbeat was real. The pain and joy and anticipation were all real, shared between two people who trusted each other completely. Our son was born just after dawn, healthy and perfect. As I held him, Amy exhausted but euphoric beside me, I felt a sense of completion. Not of revenge or vindication, but of having successfully navigated from deception to truth, from betrayal to trust, from a poisoned past to a healthy future. Mira visited that afternoon, cooing over her newest nephew. He looks like you, she said. Poor kid. Thanks for the support. She grew serious. You know what? You did it. You survived something that destroys most people and came out stronger. I had help. You, the lawyers, the investigators. But you did the hardest part. You chose truth over comfortable lies. You chose legal justice over vigilante revenge. You chose to rebuild rather than remain in ruins. Very poetic for a forensic accountant. I have depths, she said, then grinned. Plus, I might have practiced that speech. We laughed, the sound filling the hospital room with warmth. This was what victory looked like. Not courtroom convictions or financial settlements, but a hospital room full of family, a new life beginning, trust rebuilt and thriving. That evening, as Amy slept and I held our son, I thought about the long journey from that spare bedroom where I'd planned a nursery for a child that would never exist. The path had been brutal, marked by betrayal and fraud and criminal trials. But it had led here, to this moment, to this real child with his mother's nose and my stubborn chin. The methodical approach had worked. Document everything. Trust the legal system. Let truth do the heavy lifting. Don't seek petty revenge. Rebuild deliberately. Vanessa was in prison again. Connor was a pariah trying to hide behind religious conversion. Their professional lives were destroyed, their reputations permanently ruined. They'd received justice in full measure. But that wasn't my victory. My victory was this: a son in my arms, a wife I trusted completely, a career that continued to thrive, a life built on truth rather than lies. The slow poison had been purged completely. What remained was healthy, strong, and most importantly, real. 10 years later, at James's Little League game, I stood with other parents cheering on our kids. Amy was there with Emma and our youngest, Michael, now 7 and full of energy. It was a perfectly ordinary Saturday, the kind I'd once imagined having with Vanessa before everything fell apart. Dr. Thorne? A voice said behind me. I turned to find a young woman, maybe mid-20s, looking nervous. Yes? I'm Rebecca Martinez. You don't know me, but you helped me, indirectly. I was confused until she explained. I was one of Connor Hayes' victims, at Pinnacle Real Estate. When you exposed what he was doing, it gave me the courage to come forward, to file my own complaint. I'm glad you got justice. I got more than that. The settlement helped me go back to school. I'm a lawyer now, specializing in employment law. I help women like me who were exploited by men in power. That's wonderful. I wanted to thank you for being methodical, for documenting everything, for showing that the system can work if you approach it correctly. She handed me a business card. If you ever need anything, legally speaking, please call. It's the least I can do. After she left, Amy asked who she was. Someone from the past, I said, but also proof that good can come from terrible situations. Your ripple effect, Amy said. Your methodical pursuit of justice helped more than just us. That evening, I found myself in my office, the same room that had once been planned as a nursery for a child that never existed. It was now truly a home office, walls lined with veterinary journals and family photos. The box marked "Past" sat in a locked filing cabinet, untouched for years but still there, evidence of a journey from deception to truth. I pulled it out, looking through the documents one last time. The insurance forms that had started everything, the recordings that had confirmed my suspicions, the trial transcripts, the letters from prison. Then, methodically, I fed them into the shredder. Not out of anger or desire to forget, but because they'd served their purpose. Justice had been delivered. Lessons had been learned. New lives had been built. The documentation was no longer needed. As the last piece of paper disappeared into the machine, Amy appeared in the doorway. "Spring cleaning?" she asked. "Letting go," I corrected. "Finally." "Good. Dinner's ready. James helped make the salad." "Did he wash the vegetables?" "Thoroughly. He's inherited your methodical nature." "Poor kid." "Lucky kid," she corrected. "That methodical nature will serve him well." As we walked to the dining room, where our children waited with the casual chaos of family dinner, I felt the last weight of the past lift away. The slow poison was not just purged but forgotten, replaced entirely by the healthy life we'd built through patience, truth, and yes, methodical attention to doing the right thing, the right way. The spare bedroom had finally become what it was meant to be, not a monument to loss or betrayal, but simply a room in a house full of life, laughter, and love. The transformation was complete, the circle closed, the future secured through the simple act of choosing truth over lies, justice over revenge, and methodical rebuilding over dramatic destruction. And in that choice, made day after day, document by document, truth by truth, lay the real victory. Not in the destruction of those who'd wronged me, but in the construction of something better from the ruins they'd left behind.